All right, everybody, welcome back to another Future Focus, where we are living at the intersection of business, technology, and the human experience. As always, I am looking forward to today's conversation. But before we get started, if you find this episode helpful or beneficial, or you know somebody who would, please share it with them. Like it, help people find it, all that good stuff. And if you're not subscribed to the Substack, where I share my reflections on the conversation, go check that out. I still would encourage you to listen to the whole conversation, but sometimes having the TLDR version of what were the biggest highlights can always be nice. So why not get both of those? And with that, I'm going to transition over, because today I'm talking about digital twin technology. And if you go, digital what technology? Well, hopefully by the end of this, you know exactly what that is. But I think also we're not only going to show you some of the everyday practical uses today and why this can be so disruptive to the way we do workforce innovation and just operational efficiency, but really the potential it has for the future as we think about automation, the intersection of AI and robotics. The potential is limitless, in my opinion. And so as we get into this, I'm joined by Boaz Goldschmidt. He is I think I've got this right, the founder and CEO of Treedis. Did I get that right, Boaz?
No, I'm VP of Business Development.
Okay.
Yeah, I was Omer Shamai is our CEO and co-founder, and we have another co-founder, Nathaniel Lombroso, and I go back with Nathaniel to high school, so that's kind of like the way we got together. I guess
you're still part of that early team. You've been around with these gentlemen.
Yeah. I think when I joined, we were like I'd say it was like 5 or 6 of us, and now we're I think over 30.
Wow. Okay.
And growing by, I wouldn't say by the hour, but by the month.
That's awesome.
So yeah, it's been an amazing journey with them.
Well, as far as I'm concerned, if your employee number is in the single digits, I consider that being part of the founding team. So you're in good company, regardless of whether you have the official title of founder behind it or not. For those, I've gotten to know you through this process, as I often do, but I'm actually curious, for those who don't know you, your background. Also, we got a little bit of that. You went back to high school with one of the founders, but how did you end up in the digital twin space? And was that something, have you always been around tech? Was kind of the business development side more your sweet spot? How did you land here?
Yeah. So this is actually, I think I'd say it's a cool story, because if I go back like 3.5 years ago, 4 years ago, let's say just before COVID hit, I was owning and managing my own pizza bar.
Really?
So yeah, just making pizzas, people coming in to drink beers after work, your classic kind of local bar where everybody knows everyone.
Okay.
And I was probably
like the Cheers of pizza places.
Yeah, and I was like the farthest away from tech as you can imagine.
Okay.
Working with my hands, deliveries, all that stuff. And then two main events happened. The first one was COVID hit, which pretty much smashed the restaurant industry into the ground.
Yeah, that had a pretty disruptive effect on that, especially if you had the kind of restaurant that was like the local, everybody came, everybody knew your name type of a thing. I can see how even just culturally that would have a major impact on it.
Yeah, and it's funny to see how, like, today when we look back to it, everything looks so surreal. Like, did that really happen, COVID? Was that like a movie, or was I dreaming? But yeah, so COVID kind of hit, and I was also blessed with the birth of my first child.
Okay.
And then I came to the conclusion that this isn't what I want for myself currently. Yeah. It's not the right place to be for someone who wants to have, an ordinary family life. So I started looking to do something else, and knowing that I don't have any kind of degree from any university or college, I knew it would be challenging. But I said, okay, I'll just try and get that interview. Just talk to people. I'm sure my life experience is worth something. And then, believe it or not, by chance, I mean, luck or fate, whatever you want to call it, Nathaniel, which I went with him to high school, and we've been good friends. They were just like at the beginning of founding Treedis.
Okay.
It's just that part where they started to look for maybe one or two more people.
Okay.
And he knew my situation, and he was like, "Yeah, why? I mean, we're looking to expand. Why don't you come? Let's try it out." And I guess for the time, it was a great win-win for both of us, because for them it was, when you're starting a startup, you can't sign LeBron James of tech.
No.
You got to start from the bottom. So for them, it was, I
Well,
guess,
and trust is big too. That's the other thing.
yeah,
In those early days, surrounding yourself with people you trust actually can almost be as essential as subject matter expertise, because it's like, well, we're going to be going through some rocky times and we don't know what to expect, and we need to make sure everybody who's here, we've got each other's back.
right. And exactly, because you can learn anything. You can learn how to sell. You can learn about
Yeah.
tech, how it works. Unless we're talking about like coding roles, which I totally understand that you need someone that's professional. Everything else can be taught. You can gain experience. So for them, it was great. It was like convenient for me as well. Obviously, it was kind of like my ticket out from the restaurant industry and into tech. And like you said, the loyalty was a big
Dude,
thing, because we go back, and he knew that he can count on me. I knew that I can count on him, and Omer, his partner, his co-founder. And yeah, and fast forward to 3.5 years later, and here I am.
that's awesome. That's awesome. I love stories like that. And that's why I like to dig into some of this stuff, because I think sometimes people have this impression of, a company is this cold, sterile entity off doing this. But at the end of the day, companies are made up of people, and
Yeah,
and relationships, and how these things come together can, make or break an organization. So I love that. And I also think it's a cool story, even just your background and how, I think sometimes people have this idea that tech is this thing for a certain group of people who have a certain set of expertise, and that's not really my thing, so there's really nowhere for me to play in that space. And here you go from running a local pizza place to going, you're in the digital twin, in my opinion, one of the late breaking technology spaces right now. So I'm guessing, though, that wasn't on your childhood thing of like, someday I'm going to be leading at a senior level in a tech company. It sounds like that was not on your radar.
no, I'd say that maybe my childhood dream would be to be a professional football player. And not what you guys call football, but
I
you
know.
guys call
Whenever
soccer. Yeah,
anybody else in the world says football, I know they're not
yeah,
talking about American
yeah,
football.
the round ball that you actually
Yes.
use your foot to play with.
Yeah. Yeah.
But yeah, so yeah,
The
at the end
most
of the day,
popular sport in the world.
yeah, yeah, minor comment.
Yeah.
So yeah, it was. I think that it's just about finding something that challenges you, and
Yeah.
that allows you to provide for your family,
Yeah.
and just to wake up every morning knowing that you're doing something that's meaningful for the world and challenging, but also meaningful for yourself, for your
Yeah.
family. And it's a good place to be in. It
Well,
really
and
is.
as we, I want to shift to the tech, but I think there's two pieces that, regardless of why you're tuning in to listen into this, I think there's two takeaways that I think is really cool about your story. Is, one, you hit on the fact that you can learn anything. And at this point, the times are so disruptive right now. Nobody's sure what the future looks like and what the job market looks like and what you're going to have to do. And that can be really intimidating. But to your point, like, you can pick these things up, you can figure out how to navigate it. It's really about your attitude and your mindset. And, I think that ties to the second point, which is you can go through really tough times. I mean, good grief, your whole livelihood got just completely torpedoed, and you had to make a choice. You could sit there and sulk in it and go, oh, woe is me. Or you go, well, it is what it is, and I'm going to move on, and I'm going to learn something new and pick it up. And I think that's an awesome story and something that anybody should be taking to mind, because we're in really disruptive times right now. And I have no doubt there's a lot of people that are doing things today that you won't be doing in 12, 18 months, maybe 6 months. And we're all going to have to go through that. I'm on record saying 100% of jobs will be disrupted by technology. Now, does it mean they're all going away? No, but they will be disrupted. And I think that attitude of learning agility and going, all right, well, I'm going to have to adapt and adjust is just going to be people's competitive advantage. So I actually think there's a ton of value in your story.
Thanks.
So with that, we may have folks who go, digital twin, what are we talking about here? Are we talking about, cloning, AI cloning, right? I've heard people, when I bring up this topic, people have all sorts of misconceptions. So I'm curious, when you engage with people and you talk about digital twinning and what that technology is, how do you describe it? And let's break it down for folks who may not be as familiar. Hang on here. I think you froze for a minute. So if you don't come back immediately.
There I go.
Oh, there you go. Now you're back.
Yeah,
perfect.
Sorry.
Did you hear my question?
Yeah, I heard your question.
Okay, perfect. You can jump into
We're talking about disruptive times. We got to adapt. So.
Well, and that's what we do on the show. Things happen. We just adjust. So when you engage with somebody who doesn't know what this is or isn't as familiar, how do you break it down for them in simple terms?
So when people ask me like what I do, I find that when I say digital twin, it always comes with a follow-up question like what that is. And then when you try to explain it to people, you always hear a response like saying, "Oh, so it's like Google Maps, or it's like it's a virtual tour, or all these kind of catchphrases that people feel." And rightly so, that they're connected to that world, but it's not exactly the definition. So I think for me, the definition of a digital twin is a digital replica of any physical space. And when we say space, that can be a factory, a house, a store, an office, large space, small space, indoor, outdoor. It can be anything.
Yep.
And then that digital replica is viewed, visually in a 3D environment.
Yep.
And then you can view that on any device remotely. So on a desktop, on a VR headset, that we have plenty of those. So I'm not sure that that's the kind of dictionary definition if you look up what a digital twin is. But that's a good place to start, because then people understand that you can actually, the room I'm in, I can actually capture it with a camera that has technology to capture that and create that digital replica of this room that I can then, it's on the cloud, so I can then start by just viewing it. And then I'm sure we'll talk about all the amazing things you can do with it. But
and I think that's what's great about your definition, because I do think it helps people understand it, because we'll describe it and then we can get into how it can be used with purpose. But I can see where when you talk to people, they immediately gravitate to probably like the example they have in their head, which anybody who's ever looked for a house might go, oh yeah, like the real estate thing where you can like go through, you can do the virtual walkthrough, and you're like, that's a use case. Yes. But what we're really talking about is the technology that allows you to, like you said, create a perfect duplicate digital replicate, a digital replicate of whatever physical environment you're talking about. So again, the examples you gave that people reference, like Google Maps, the Street View. Yeah, that's a digital walkthrough in a sense, a virtual walkthrough of a real estate app, things like that. Yes, those are things, but really it's the underpinning technology that we're talking about that allows you to capture, and then we'll get to like actually modify and actually change some of those things.
Right. And it's, and there is a reason why people intuitively think about that kind of maybe panorama image viewer, like a 360 viewer. They saw an apartment a few years ago,
Yep.
or Google Maps that's been around for well over a decade, maybe even more. But it's just like you can ask someone, so what's a camera? And then they're going to say, oh, it's that thing you put a film inside, and you need to kind of roll that thing, and you have a flash and you push the button. So, I mean, that's what it used to be. But today a camera is something entirely different. So it's the same world, but it just means that you're not aware of where the technology is currently. And
Yep.
it's made a massive leap since.
Yeah. Well, and I think that's one of the things that even people I know who maybe have had light or limited interaction with the technology, a lot of times what they're familiar with is legacy or outdated. I mean, I remember I was doing work with digital twins a long time ago, and it was pretty onerous to do it. It was relatively expensive. It wasn't necessarily super scalable and easy to do. And so that's where sometimes I think people get the impression of like, okay, but like, so what would you do with that? How would we actually implement it? So I am curious, where are you seeing some of kind of the trends in terms of adoption, or even just kind of some of the areas where this is really starting to gain steam?
That's a great question, because I think there's pretty much across the board, we see gaining interest in every industry. So real estate, travel and hospitality, retail, museums, campuses. But I think where we really see it booming, especially during this year, and we're also forecasting the next year, is the industrial space.
Yeah.
The industrial space, I don't know how many people have actually set foot in a factory, a modern day factory, but those spaces are so complex, and there's so many things going on, and there's
It's
so
not like
much
what a lot of
knowledge.
people have in their head from like the 1950s type of a thing, where it's like,
Right.
it's not, they don't work like that anymore.
Right. But even if you think of like the Charlie Chaplin movie, where you see like just things moving by and a lot of things are happening, even that is complex. So today it's just 10 times more complex, and there's so much knowledge and data and people kind of coming together to try and make this factory work as efficiently as possible. And the digital twin is definitely I think a breakthrough in terms of how much they can improve and become more efficient. And for them, obviously, it's all about it is all about money. I mean, these companies,
for sure.
yeah,
For sure. And I think this is where we'll kind of unpack the problem statement. Before we do, though, I want to go back to helping people understand how this works, because we kind of talked about the concept of capturing a digital twin, which is basically making a digital replica of a physical environment. So let's run through for somebody who's like, so how do you actually go about doing that? Just so people who may not be familiar with it, what does that look like today? Because it used to be extremely complicated. There was a lot of equipment involved with doing all this stuff. Today, good grief, I'm amazed what you can do in a matter of seconds to actually create some of this stuff.
Yeah. So I'll break it down into two kind of processes: what you can see that's being done, and then what happens kind of behind the scenes. So what you see being done is you would see someone with a camera, a device on a tripod, putting it, setting it up at one point, pushing a button, then the camera either rotates or doesn't, because it has lenses on
the 360 cameras, depending on what kind of camera it's using.
And then you click the button, and then the person is going to take the tripod, place it somewhere near to that, and then just go through the space. So if we're talking about, let's say, an apartment, just because that helps simplify things.
Yeah, I was going to say that does help people, because if they might have actually experienced this, where they've done a virtual walkthrough, that experience of like you tap on the little dots on the floor. But if you think and reverse engineer that, those dots are the
Or the
tripod you're
camera.
talking about with the camera that's then doing the scan.
Yeah. So you have like maybe a couple or 3 in each room in your apartment. And then once you're done with that, that's finished. That can take, on a average size apartment, it can take like minutes, maybe half an hour.
Yep.
So for large spaces like a factory, it can take maybe a day, maybe a couple of days, but to capture the entire thing, which is really, like you said, I mean, if we look back, it could have taken weeks if we're looking like a few years back.
I remember back when we first started doing it, you'd have to block things off for long periods of time. You'd shut things down for a while to actually capture this stuff.
Right. And now it's really so quick and easy to use. So that's what you would see if you would look at someone capturing a space. Then what you don't see, and I'll just give a little bit of
another example I was thinking as you get into the don't see. If you've seen the Google car driving around, it's got that little thing up on the top.
Right.
I mean, that's kind of
that's a camera.
It's driving around and boop, snapshotting it. Okay. So then what you don't see.
Yeah, what you don't see is what the camera is doing. So the camera, it obviously just takes a picture, which you know what that is like. But what it also does, the advanced cameras, it has a LiDAR technology, which means it sends out laser beams. And then those laser beams, if we're talking about a room, they hit the wall, and then the camera recognizes the distances. So you can easily, I mean, the camera creates what we call a point cloud. So let's say I sent a laser beam to the wall, it hit the wall. So I'm going to place a point there, a point within a 3D environment. Try to think of it as if you close your eyes and then you just send out your hands and feel your surroundings.
Yeah.
You feel a wall. If your eyes are closed, you can already in your brain kind of visualize, okay, there's a wall here, and then you move it along, and then there's a light switch
a mental map. I mean, one example that I think of, that for anybody who's ever used a VR headset, that this may be very familiar with the LiDAR component of it, is, when you first put it on and you're setting up your environment, you literally see it creating these maps in the headset, where it's doing more than just snapping a picture. It's actually mapping all the physical objects, the distance, the textures, like literally everything is being mapped through that radar, LiDAR, like you said, LiDAR. So it's doing more than just, here's a flat file picture of this. It's actually creating that 3D model through the tech.
Right. And then that gives us what we call the point cloud. And if you look at that like raw point cloud, it's just a lot of dots, kind of like I'm sure everyone saw The Matrix. I mean, I hope. Like at the end when he just sees the green letters, and it kind of formulates the shape of Agent Smith, and so
that's when it's like the badass part of it, when he's standing up and he's able to actually just see the climax, the ones and zeros.
So that's the point cloud. And then I guess the process that's done is that you combine the two together, the point cloud and the picture, so that when you later on take a look at it, you don't just see the matrix, you actually have a picture kind of placed on it, so you can understand, okay, here's a wall, I see the wall, but it's actually represented in 3D. So when we'll talk about what we do with it, I can measure, for example, from that wall, because it's represented in the 3D as a wall. Okay. So that's the, I guess, the introduction, like digital twin 101.
Yeah.
I guess.
Well, and I like that you talked about the back end side of it, because without understanding that, it can seem like on the surface, like, so it's a bunch of pictures, and it's like, well, it is, but it's more than that, because really when we get into what you can do with it, you need more than just an image, because you need to be able to manipulate and modify, well, what would it look like if we were to do something different in this environment?
Exactly. And when you work with digital twins for a while, you become like Neo. At some point, you don't need the images. It's more about the point cloud. It's more about the,
So are you suggesting now that when you walk around and you go look at things, you don't even look at it, you're just seeing ones and zeros?
Yeah. Yeah. And occasionally, you know, I stop bullets and stuff like that. But yeah, that's just for fun.
Just for fun. Just for fun. I got it. Okay. So now hopefully that helps kind of ground people in the technology and, you know, how it works, things like that. I think that kind of logically leads people to some of the next questions of, okay, so now you have a fully digital version of a 3D environment that not only just is images of it, but actually has 3D structure to it that you can
Yeah.
then see how things actually fit into it. It's not a flat picture. This then translates to, okay, where are people starting to use this? Which I can see from a, you know, why some of the examples people are most familiar with, like a virtual walkthrough in an apartment or a house. It's great because instead of having to physically show up at the house, you can kind of walk through it and get a feel for, okay, this is the layout, this is the way you navigate through the house, things like this. I'm curious, before we get to some of the manufacturing and industrial ones, did you see a significant rise in like the post-COVID era initially with some of this stuff? Was there a surge a little bit in this for some of those more practical use cases where it was like, well, I can't go to the museum, but what if we had a 3D model of the museum that people could walk through? Did you see people kind of starting to get the gist of how it might be used more as you couldn't physically go to some of this stuff?
Yeah. And I think that might be one of the few things that was actually positive and good about COVID, is that it kind of helped us skip that phase where you have early adapters and then people start to use it. So just like Zoom, for example, virtual meetings. I mean, before COVID hit, it was, you know, if you want to meet someone for business, you got to go to their office and meet. And then
Yeah, and
COVID
people
hit.
kind of like, I do remember pre-COVID, there still were a lot of people that were like, why would we meet on Zoom? Like, I don't
Yeah,
understand. I mean,
that's
what is
awkward,
that?
and yeah, and yeah, I don't have a microphone, and that's very awkward, and there's no personal touch. But then COVID kind of made everyone do it. And then post COVID, you can travel, you can meet physically. Think, well, it wasn't that bad to meet on
Right.
Zoom. So why don't we do most of our meetings on Zoom, save 80% of our travel costs, and then just meet physically for the important meetings? So I
Yep.
think same goes with the digital twin, and for like you said, the more simple and common use cases for like real estate. If you're looking to lease an apartment, instead of running all over town,
Looking
actually
at 15 of them
physically.
only to go, oh, I hate the
Yeah,
layout of this one.
yeah, or yeah. So just you go online and you can visit all the 15 apartments like within the hour and already get a good grasp. So when you narrow it down to maybe 2 apartments, so yeah, you might go physically, but that's a big time saver and money saver. And people were just forced to adapt it. That was the good thing about COVID, and we
Yeah.
definitely see that.
Okay.
Um,
Okay. Well, and I was wondering if it did kind of force adoption of some of this and also just create a greater awareness to it, because I think probably pre that, I mean, there were a few, like you said, early adapters who were more familiar with it. But I mean, I remember in the days pre-COVID, if I brought up digital twin, honestly, it was rare that anybody even knew what I was talking about. Most people were
right.
like, I have no, what, you have a biological, they just really had no concept of what I was even saying. Where I would say post, they may not have had the words, but once I explained it, they're like, oh yeah, no, I know what that is. And I can see that. To me, some of those use cases though, I feel like that's like level one, valuable. And I know like in the learning space, it can be super helpful for people. I was using digital twins in the like 2010s for like campus tours and things like that, where it's like, well, you might have a student that wants to see how the campus layout is, but
Exactly.
they can't travel here. And man, if we had a digital twin of the environment, at least people could kind of do it. And it was helpful. But again, it was big, it was expensive, it cost a lot to do it. So I think, but again, I see that as kind of that baseline tier. And I think what's exciting about the advancement in technology is now you can do that level one stuff
Yeah.
so
You can do it
easy.
with your iPhone.
Yeah. Like you go spend, I mean, iPhone or good grief, go spend $150 on an Insta 360 camera, and
Right.
you can
Yeah.
pretty quickly just go, I can go do this, no problem. And so there's a lot of use cases where when I talk to some organizations, I'm like, why don't you have this? I honestly sometimes struggle to be like, why aren't you
Yeah.
using at least this on the baseline? Maybe not the more advanced piece.
Yeah, absolutely. Like, are you still using fax machines? It's
We got our typewriters and our,
yeah.
pigeon express delivering our mail here type of a thing. Yeah. To me, it's just one of those like natural pairings where you go, well, you might as well have a digital twin of really any physical environment, even for just some of that baseline stuff. I know for a lot of companies I've advised to be like for onboarding, things like that. It's a great resource for employees. They're new to the company. You don't know where the bathrooms are or where the cafeteria is. Like give people access to a resource where, hey, you
Yeah.
can kind of flip around on your phone. But again, to me, that's like the baseline stuff. That's not the really advanced further thinking you were hinting at as we start talking into the manufacturing space.
Yeah, it is. And it's also, you mentioned like onboarding new employees. That's, you see a lot of, I mean, time goes on, and currently a lot of new employees are already Gen Z kids. I call them kids, but some of them are young adults.
Yeah.
And for them, that's like the standard. That's the world.
Yeah.
They know all about it. They're connected. So as a company, as an organization, you don't want to be pictured as some like outdated company. You want to be right there on the forefront of technology. Yeah, we offer the best. We obviously we have a digital twin,
Right.
because you want to attract talent. You want to make sure that people feel that your company is a good place to be at.
Yeah. And it's so funny because now again, because the cost has come down so significantly, to me, this is one of those, like you said, I honestly struggle sometimes to go, why wouldn't you have this? You can do
Yeah,
this for a
peanuts.
fraction
Yeah,
of what you used to be able to do. And again, customers coming to your, if they're coming to your office, things like this, and you just want to be like, hey, here's a map of this. You can pull it up on your phone and you'll see where the parking lot is. Here's where you enter the building. Here's where you get to whatever, where you check in. And it's almost an expectation, especially like you said, of the younger generations where
yeah.
they go, what do you mean what do you mean I have to take a tour when I get, where's the map that I can just go diddle around on myself before I start type of a thing. And it's such an easy thing to do now. The number of companies I tell where I'm like, you should be doing this, period, at least on this level 1 stuff. Maybe you're not on the level 2, level 3, advanced, process optimization side of things, but at least for the basics, to me,
Yeah,
it's just a no brainer.
exactly. Yeah,
Okay.
it's I feel it's yeah, I mean, it's I already feel that in companies, there's much more awareness.
Yeah.
And they already know. Maybe they don't all have it, but they already know what you're talking about, especially if their competitors are doing it. And
Yeah.
that's when they get interested.
Well, and to me, it's an easy win for companies who want to do something to improve employee experience or even customer experience, because it might not even be employees. It might be something where, I think of just as an example, if you're in healthcare or retail or something like that, where your customers can have something that they can access to go, how do you get around? Or, what is the experience like for you? When you can do it in a couple hours with low
Yeah.
cost, it's kind of one of those like, why wouldn't you do this type of thing? But let's transition to some of the more advanced stuff, because I think to me, we're moving to a state, and maybe some of the folks watching or listening go, well, we're not doing that. Well, I would say get out there and explore this stuff, because it's a low hanging fruit that honestly anybody could be going, there's some really practical use cases. We should be able to, apply something like this. And honestly, it's going to become the expectation. But now let's transition to some of this more advanced stuff where it may not just be, oh, we want to have a digital map of our building or something like that, where we start getting into some of these things.
Yeah. So what do you want to start with? I mean, there's so many kind of use cases,
Yeah,
advanced
well,
use
so let's
cases.
let's let's continue on the manufacturing one, because someone
Okay.
may say, okay, we capture manufacturing plant. You could, right, level one, use that to say, well, this might help employees know how to navigate their way around. Okay, fine, yes. But then there's another level, and I think it gets back to what you said before. Those manufacturing floors are far more advanced and complex than most people realize. And there's a lot happening that people may not necessarily even be thinking about. So let's talk about, beyond just the how you navigate the thing, how are industrial companies looking at digital twins to go, you know what, we can use this to optimize this space that we have.
Yeah. So there's quite a few use cases there, and I mean the first big advantage for them is that all use cases come from the same digital twin.
Yeah.
They don't have to kind of capture it again and again and again. They have
Right.
this kind of foundation, and then okay, we're going to use this for this and for that. Kind of like when you have a I guess onions in your house and you're cooking dinner. So you're going to cut onions to do this, cut onions to do that, cut onions to make this, to fry that. It's kind of like the start of every dish. You
Yep.
fry onion and garlic. So I think I mean, we can go through a lot of them. I think one of the more interesting ones is training.
Okay.
Training as a professional training tool.
Okay.
The industrial space is facing a serious challenge in the next, I'd say, decade.
If they're not already in it now, which many
They're already in it,
organizations
yeah.
I know are in it right now.
And that challenge is that they have the older generation that was characterized with getting a job and keeping at that job, sticking to it for like 30, 40 years until you
Yep.
retire. And then they have people that their brains have so much knowledge and experience on what goes on in the factory, and these people are expected to retire within the next decade.
Okay.
And then their challenge is, okay, we're going to recruit new employees. How do we make sure that knowledge doesn't walk out the door with that employee that's retired? How do we make sure we train our new employees? And then that's when we want the environment to be, again, the foundation for this training. So imagine we have this tiny engine room in a factory, and we want to train a class of engineers how to work, I don't know, some procedure about the engine, changing the
Yep.
oil, for example. Without the digital twin, you would have to cramp 10, 15 young engineers in that room, which is really noisy. You can't
Yep.
hear a thing.
And
And
very expensive.
you're trying to show them, and while you're showing them, you got to shut down the engine, so that part of the factory isn't working, so you're basically losing money. And the factory can be out in the middle of nowhere
Yep.
without a digital twin. I'm not going to talk about injuries that can happen and so on.
Right.
With digital twin, you capture that space. You can implement all the knowledge into that space. So you can add videos, you can add images, indications, animations to make the digital environment very engaging. You can add manuals on how it's done. And then you can have a class of 50 young engineers going through this training course and doing it in a safe environment, so no accidents, quiet environment. And the engine is running at the time. You don't
Yep.
need to shut
Yeah,
on the engine.
you're not taking the downtime.
Yeah, and they can do it again and again and again and again until they get familiar with it. And then you can also add gamified components to actually test the knowledge retention and get a report on each employee. So I have this oil changing procedure. Okay, step one. What do you do first? And then I'm going to have to get the right answer. If I don't get the right answer, I can't proceed with this kind of training module within the 3D environment. That way, this class of engineers, when they set foot on the physical site for the first time, they're more familiar with the processes.
They have a lot more contextual information because it's not the first time they're actually experienced the context of the environment. They've been exposed to it before.
Exactly. And they feel confident. They feel confident with what they're about to meet, the different scenarios, the different procedures they have to go through.
Yeah.
And like you said, it's not just they didn't learn this on slideshows like a PowerPoint.
Right. They got to physically
dynamic.
interact with the environment.
Yeah.
Well, and I think what's interesting about that sometimes the pushback I've seen to this is, well, but there's nothing like being in the physical environment. And I think to your point, we're not saying it's a competition with that. It's the fact that it's like, well, no, but it's not super efficient. Going back to your meeting example, 100% of your meetings were not value add with the in-person component. Exactly. 80% of them could have been accomplished without that. I personally, on the meetings one, would go 100%, but you get the gist of it where you go, hey, look, we can trim back some of this. So at least we say, yeah, sure, fine. Actually bring them to the live engine room. Not saying eliminate that, but if you can replicate that in a way that allows people to physically interact with this, in the contextual way, you're actually reducing the friction to learning, because that contextual layer is very hard to simulate in just like words or pictures or things like that, because people need to be able to navigate around, to actually manipulate this stuff. And I think the digital twin allows you to do that. And to your point from earlier, it's the nuts and bolts. It's the foundation of it that then can be used if you want to layer VR on top of it to actually have people navigate around in a virtual route. You don't have to. You could have people do it from a mobile device or a computer, but you actually have the environment by which people can start to interact with in a physical way while still being in the digital world.
Yeah. And it translates into, at the end of the day, it translates into money, because if it takes you 6 months to train this engineer, and with these tools, you bring it down to 4 months. So the multipliers in these organizations translate into millions of dollars. Or for example, if we do safety trainings, so just simple safety trainings in this environment, where's the fire exit? What do you do in case of an alarm? We actually had clients report to us that these safety training experiences helped reduce insurance premiums, because
I'm sure they did.
Companies understand that, okay, employees are now less likely to be involved in an accident or a safety event. And then we're talking about millions of dollars here.
Yeah.
So for them, it's definitely worth it. And they know they're not trying, like you said, nobody's trying to replace 100% of it. We're just trying to become more efficient.
Well, I would be. But again, it's one of those things where you go, hey, like, let's actually use the physical environment where we absolutely need to, because we can show that it absolutely is a requirement. Like, again, going back to some of the manufacturing stuff, there are times where physically touching and feeling the weight, you need to be able to experience some of those things. But there's that 80% that can get you there that goes, yeah, but what if we could grease the skids in a lot of that? So by the time we get your hands on this equipment, we're not wasting our time going, we're introducing you to the very basics of how all this stuff works. We can just get straight to it.
Exactly. Yeah. So the training and onboarding use case is definitely a big one.
Okay.
And it's also part of the maintenance use case, because that same knowledge, that same oil change procedure or SAP, SOP, is they do it again and again in physically on site, these maintenance folks. And sometimes things happen. I mean, they're human beings. got a bad night's sleep or you're distracted. So how can we make sure, how do we standardize how these procedures are being operated? And that's where we use the same training module, but we provide it to the employees on site physically in the palm of their hand. How do we do that? Treedis has an AR app, and AR basically means that with my mobile device or other AR devices, the camera recognizes the environment, and then it shows on my screen, it kind of calibrates the exact location within the digital twin. Okay. And then it will visualize on my screen all the digital information. So for example, I'm in that engine room, and I want to change the oil, and then I go, oh wait, so do I first switch it off, or do I first, what do I do? I can pull out my mobile device. I can point it wherever, it calibrates, and then it just tells me, okay, step 1, go here. Okay. And it's going to show me where to go. Now switch off the engine. Oh, okay. I'll switch it off. I'll hit next. Okay, now step 2, pull out the oil meter and check it. It just runs you through it. That way you're also preventing man errors that, again, I mean, it all translates into money, but they prevent downtime and loss of money.
Well, and I think what's interesting about that is you're actually bringing that learning or performance support into the flow of somebody's actual workflow. Because to that point, let's say you're working on an engine or whatever it is, that ability, and I think you hit on something there that people may not always think about. The digital twin, there's 2 components to that. This again goes to the backstage part. One, you're capturing the digital twin of that engine so that the platform recognizes, hey, this object. Then behind the scenes, you're layering on this digital information. Then that end user is going, and when they scan it, it's recognizing that, pulling from the database, and now pulling up this digital layer of instructions in the palm of their hand, helping them through whatever it is they're trying to do. So rather than, I just even think of the efficiency behind this, rather than going, well, now I need to either go find somebody I can ask, or go sit at the service desk or whatever and try and look up this or find the job aid or whatever. You're now bringing that support to somebody in that moment when they're actually doing it, when they need it most.
Right. And it's, I mean, you just hit on something there when you said, I need to find somebody to ask. So it's just another kind of feature set that we have, is that, let's say I get stuck, even with the information I have digitally. I still need to add.
You got the instruction manual, and you're like, this isn't working.
Right.
Like, I can't quite figure this out.
Right. And it's not like IKEA furniture. It's an actual engine. So who do I ask? If I mean, with Treedis, what you can do with the app, I can just place a tag there through, like, physically. I'm next to the engine. I'm holding my mobile device. I'll place a tag there and just write tag someone, like a specialist that might be sitting at the headquarters, on the other side of the world, and just tag him and say, hey, this doesn't look right. The engine is, I don't know, steaming or something. What should I do? And I can add a picture or whatever. Then this specialist gets a notification. He logs into his desktop, pulls up the digital twin, goes to that exact same point, sees the tag I left, looks at my question, and replies. Okay. And it becomes even more advanced when we can go in a live session. So just like Zoom, but he can see what I'm pointing at, and then he's going to annotate on my screen and say, oh, you see this little fuse box here? Open it up and switch off that fuse. That's what you're doing wrong. So it's not just connecting the workers with the digital information, but it's also connecting the workers with each other. Yeah, that's why, I mean, it's called connected workers. That's like a big buzzword in that space. But there is a reason it's called connected workers, because it's connecting everyone and kind of bringing everyone closer to each other to improve efficiency.
Well, and what I love about that piece that And I'm very familiar with the connected worker solutions and how this stuff starts to fit together, because there's sometimes this idea that technology is just further isolating us. We just do everything on our own and all, which it has that risk. But the reality is, just like you described, maybe 8 times out of 10, you do just need to, like, I'm just going through the thing and it's fine. And I don't necessarily need to pull somebody in, and this is all I need. But those 2 times that you're stuck, you actually need somebody. And it's not efficient to have that subject matter person with you the other 8 when they're like, you're
what
fine.
am I doing
You don't
here?
need me. Like, I can't just sit and shadow you around all day long when you're fine 8 out of 10. But those 2 times, it really matters. And going back to something you talked about before, where as some of the folks who, and when I was with GE, we were doing a lot of this, the people who have the 40 years of doing this, that can look at the steam coming off of the thing and go, no, that's this.
They can smell it just by smelling it. Yeah.
Right. They know exactly what it is. They may not necessarily always want to be the ones that are still out in the field doing all this stuff, figuring this stuff out. There's less of them because they may be retiring. They're moving on to different things. And so there's less of them to go around. And that can be very stressful for organizations that go, well, what do we do? We've got all these new people in an organization. We don't have enough to go around and say, hey, can you just shadow all our new employees? Well, no. But with connected worker solutions, in some senses, this is where we were doing a lot of work around this, where they could, because to your point, they're back at a command center doing, whatever they need to do. And as things pop up, they're the person that you tag in, Judy or Bill or whoever who's been doing this for 60 years, and they know this stuff inside out. And Tom's out there getting stuck, and Tom goes, what do I do? And they're able to support a massive portion of the workforce with that expertise. And it's actually a great retention strategy, because those subject matter experts are like, I'm digging this. Like, I get to do what I love to do, which is apply my 40, 50 years of doing this all the time. Like, I just get to do it, but I don't got to deal with all the headache of zooming all over to try and figure out this stuff. And I think the layer that it adds, to your point, it actually can bring people together when you're doing it right.
Yeah. And it's when organizations start to understand, okay, so we can do this for training, but also for maintenance, and then also for connected workers, for collaboration tools. So they're starting to say, there's a lot of stuff we can do with this digital twin.
Yes.
Like, we should get started. And then it's other departments also within the organization that say, oh, wait, but can you do this? Why don't we also try and do this? And so it's just the wide variety of use cases that really, really brings this to the front of the stage as something that should definitely be adopted by these companies. I think that another very important use case is visualization of live data, what we call IoT. And again, I always like to go back to that engine room example, because it really helps people understand. So when you look at an engine, every engine in a factory space has sensors attached to it. And those sensors tell you the temperature, the rounds per minute, vibration, all these kind of metrics that are streamed into maybe some control center that normally they translate into like endless spreadsheets or things like that, where companies try to use that for predictive maintenance. But when you're on the field and you want to, again, try and make sure everything's working and perform your maintenance job the best way, when you're looking at the engine, you have no way of knowing what the temperature is.
No,
unless you put your hand on it, and then you're in trouble. But
not the best.
Yeah.
Is this hot?
Yeah. How hot is it? So yeah, but again, if you have if you're holding that mobile device in your hand and you're just pointing the camera at the engine, and then you see, okay, so this engine currently the temperature is so-and-so.
Yeah, it's tapping into all that IoT data.
So you can see
it to life in front of you.
Exactly. And then you see, oh, this looks a bit too hot for, I mean, this is just under too hot. Maybe there's
Right.
something going on here. So that helps also prevent, like what you call predictive maintenance, prevent future problems or issues with machinery. So the visualization of live data is also a very crucial part of this. It just
Yeah.
helps
Oh, it's
wrap
huge.
everything up
It's
into
huge
one
because I was
picture.
just thinking, I have a lot of friends who are mechanics and they, work on a lot of this stuff. I've worked in the manufacturing space before, and I think about some of the maintenance folks where sometimes, I just think of like, let's just say you're working on your car engine and you don't know, if your O2 sensors or your spark plugs or whatever. And a lot of times it's like until you tear the whole thing apart, you don't really know, even though that data is being captured and as machines are more and more connected, that data is somewhere. And I know there was an instance where I was working with someone, and this is exactly what they did, where they literally were able to just pull up their phone and look at the engine and literally see the status of all these sensors, all these things underneath it, and be able to see in real time, like, are they green? Are they yellow? Are there issues? And again, be able to address or prevent stuff from happening in real time, or even just knowing where to work. Like,
Yeah.
oh, here's where this is going, because again, you have all that IoT data that is available that unless you're Neo, you can't
Yeah.
see, but that's where the digital twin can actually create that digital layer that allows you to see it.
Yeah. There's only one Neo.
There's only one. One other one. We're going to run out of time. I told you we'd be able to talk for multiple hours, but I think one of the other ones that I'm curious if you're starting to see that I have always been fascinated, and to me this was another huge opportunity for this. And again, when we think about the digital twin, it's the underpinning technology that allows and enables all this. So when you start thinking about it, the use cases. But one of the ones that I did some work for a company that did a lot around, they were very much Six Sigma, and they were always running simulations of what if we changed the supply chain this way, or what if we moved our operation mechanisms like this. And I remember they had a huge, it was called the Innovation Lab, and it cost them millions of dollars a year to keep this thing up and running. And they would literally just set up the supply chain or the manufacturing line, and then they'd tear it down. And they'd be like, what if we made this small change? And then they'd run things again and they'd go, okay, was it any better? No, it wasn't. It was. And then they'd tear it down again, and then they'd set the thing back up. And it would take, I mean, they had staff, and the cost of running this thing was massive. And I remember we started to do work with digital twins in this, where we said, why don't we create a digital replica of this? And instead of going through all this effort only to find out, oh, yeah, it didn't work.
Yeah. Let's scratch that.
Let's scratch that. Let's do it
Start
digitally, and
over.
let's learn quickly and more cost effectively to be able to run that test.
Yeah. So we spoke right at the beginning about the difference between the images that you see in the point cloud.
Yep.
And that's the environment. So when you understand that you can also use that, kind of modify that point cloud to start and understand how you can change things, so it becomes a very powerful planning tool. So for example, like you said, and they're always called innovation labs. Labs. It's such an innovative name that every single company uses. But yeah, so if you start understanding that here's like my space, move this machine here, or maybe let's replace this conveyor belt with an advanced model of conveyor belts. Is it going to fit? That's the first question. Is it going to fit? Okay, now that it fits, do we have the space planned out properly? Do we have the electricity outlets in the right place? Is everything so that's like the basic planning. But then, like you said, you can easily start to simulate the flow of work and kind of understand what is the best what is the best setup or layout that I can do to improve what I'm currently doing, and easily do that without doing anything in the physical world. It's all virtual,
Yeah, no, it's what's funny is an example of this where it goes wrong, because nobody thinks about this stuff till it goes wrong. And then they're like, man, I really wish we would have thought about this.
Yeah.
I remember I was with a healthcare company, and a hospital had purchased a bunch of big healthcare equipment, and they bought it.
I know where this
is going. They went to install it.
Yeah.
And it was like, oh no, we've got to remodel the entire wing because of how this is set up and the size and the power consumption. And we had not planned for all this. And ultimately they did, but it ended up costing them exponentially more that they just hadn't planned for. And it's not that they wouldn't have done it. It's that it wasn't built into the plan because they hadn't actually anticipated all of this. Versus there was another organization I was with that we used digital twin technology to figure this out. And we were able to do it and go, okay, what is the total cost? What other modifications are we going to have to make to accommodate all this? And we were able to do it all digitally so that by the time, I mean, it still never works perfectly. You still go to implementation. You're like, ah, crap, we didn't think of this.
Yeah, or, it doesn't fit through the door.
Yeah, it doesn't go through this. We didn't think about the entryway door, so there's always that. But we were able to dramatically capture a lot of the unanticipated things that would have otherwise gone missed, and then plan for it in the plan, which just allowed things to go so much smoother.
Yeah. So it's a powerful planning tool, and there's also, I mean, the 3D space is very big. You can talk about converting into different file types like BIM. So we also see this being used for even like the construction industry.
Huge.
So for building a building, not necessarily planning out an existing space in a new way, but yeah, and again, I mean, your head just goes into so many directions.
When you really start thinking about the underlying technology and the possibilities, it's massive what you can do, which was why I was really excited. I know we had to, adjust schedules, but I'm like, I really want to get you guys on to talk about this, because again, it's an area that people may go, oh yeah, that sounds cool, but like that's so futuristic or that's so far. And it's like, it's actually not. It's something that is extremely accessible, even to a non super tech savvy group, to be able to at least get an entry point into it, start to experiment with it, start to see how this can help drive stuff. So Boaz, I'm so glad you made time for me today. I really enjoyed the conversation, and hopefully everybody watching and listening, at least goes, wow, I hadn't even thought about that, and can start to imagine some of the possibilities. We didn't even get into where I see this going in terms of training AI models and physical environments and all that other stuff. But again, I think we hit on some of the really practical and some of the more advanced use cases that demonstrate the power of what this can do.
Yeah, I mean, it's like you said, we can definitely go on and on, I guess. Just like the Matrix had Matrix 2 and 3.
Yeah, we can definitely. That's right. Maybe we'll have to do a sequel. We'll do a sequel. Yeah. We'll go even further.
Yeah, because robotics and AI, and it just never ends, and there's always new things. And if we talk like in half a year, I'm sure I'll have new features to tell you about, and more to talk about. But yeah, this was great. I had a great time, and thanks for inviting me. I think that for your listeners, if this sparked any interest, then I'm you can reach out to me. My name is there. You can look me up on LinkedIn. And if people want to just ask a question or they're interested, I like to make myself available. I'm always down to having a interesting conversation, even if it's not streamed. So yeah, I mean, this was great. This is a lot of fun.
Awesome, Boaz. Well, thank you for making the time. Thanks everybody for watching and listening. And again, hopefully it challenged your thought. And again, I would encourage anybody, if you are not at least experimenting or exploring the technology, you should be. It's very much, the potential is endless, and the entry point to get into it is accessible to anybody. So with that, Thank you so much, everybody, and we will see you on the other side.